Now the program is going on with Dr. Daniel Fels. He's working on Paramecium, on communication, communication of Cillate Paramecium. He was working as associate researcher at the University of Basel, and is going on this field in his laboratory. Please, Daniel.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for the invitation here. Before I start, I would just like to make you aware that how much do I have to do with water? Cillates are unicellular organisms, so it's one cell, as such, totally complete organism, and they swim in fresh water happily, so that's the first relation to water. They are filled with water, is their cytoplasm. And otherwise, I'm interested in the electric world of the ciliate, its ability to receive and also to emit electromagnetic signals. There is a new term now for this world of life. It's called the electrome. You know, we have these omics now, the genomics, the proteomics, the metabolomics. Now we try to invent the term electromics. And I think this is what unifies us all. We are looking at the physics of life. Some of you know that there is an interest in the application of electromagnetic fields, for example, to patients, to heal them. This is not what I'm presenting. I'm not applying any external field to the cells. I'm interested in how the cells use their own fields to communicate with each other. And of course, I'm not the only one. Fields of the Cell is a book which we edited, Michael and Felix and me, and it contains 16 chapters that were meant to introduce students into that topic. So what is the hypothesis? I believe that any physicist would say this is not a hypothesis, this is a truism. Any charged particle has around itself what we call a field, and these fields, on the other hand, have effects on charged particles. But we have never been looking at life in such a way, and so the basic hypothesis is just that cells, or polar molecules within the cells, their chemical reactions and ions all together are responsible for the appearance of electromagnetic fields. And we study how these fields feed back on life, on cells. How to do that? I do it in such a way that I'm using simple cuvettes, and I have one group of cells swimming here. I can call this the inducer population. And then I have a smaller cuvette with another group of cells, and I just place them inside. Now they cannot have a chemical communication with each other, but if they communicate, I have a chance to see this because I'm just using a control where I do not have an inducer population, but just the medium, whatever that is now. And again, the same group of tester population. And then I just make a statistical comparison between the growth of these cells and these cells. So it's a very, very simple system. You only will see growth numbers of cells, okay? I place them here. And now we go on. This is actually the same picture as before, but with a bit more of detail. Actually, the picture before was that. What I'm saying is please always see blue as a symbol for matter and red as a symbol for field. So again, I'm repeating The matter of life induces fields, and the fields feed back on matter. This is the basic assumption, and this is also published, and I call it the double aspect of life. Just to have terms that help us to bring all these different stories under the same hut. Otherwise, it's too much of individual, non-immediately understandable research. In general, life needs matter. We are eating. We are parasitized. But we are also under the influence of external fields, sun rays, and nowadays electrosmog. Cells in between them, they have a communication based on matter, metabolome, metabolites, chemical signals are used when cells communicate with each other, bestly described with the highly complex hormone system. But cells, obviously, are also able to communicate electromagnetically with each other, and in a few moments I will talk about this and about this only. Just because I was educated as an evolutionary biologist, I think it's interesting to imagine that when we reproduce, that we do not only transmit DNA into a next generation, but the cell contains also its fields, and so the fields as well are transmitted to the future. And as they play with the matter and also with the DNA, I have a feeling that we should also extend our understanding of the process of evolution. But this is not the topic. I'm now presenting you these fantastic cells. I'm a total fan of them because I'm sure I will never understand them. To me, they are like spaceships, you know. It's just, for example, they have here 2,000 little engines. I mean, 2,000 engines, yeah? I'm happy with one when I drive a car. They have 2,000, and they move, these are hairs, like the ciliates, and they move them in a way that this is now a ciliate. They make very quick movements like that, turning, twisting, hop, hop, even curve. And I wonder myself, how do you organize that? How do you do that? You know? And I'm sure we cannot explain this with Brownian molecular movement and chemicals. This must be an electric phenomenon. So I think these are really electric beings. Sorry. I did a series of experiments. I began just with the question, is there really something going on from one population to the other? And I will show you the results in a moment. Then I became interested in the function of the signals. What are they talking about? Whether we can think of a kind of a universal code. Is it true for Paramecium only? Or is it a life phenomenon like DNA? And I will tell you something about the environment in a very particular way. So again, you already understood, this is what we call the barrier method. Here you see the cuvettes. And again, for a last time, the glass prevents chemical communication, but allows electromagnetic communication from an outer population to an inner population of cells. And before I really started, I would kind of like to say thank you to Alexander Govich, who somehow is the founder of all that kind of research. And I'm very touched because as a 17-year-old boy, I was reading about his experiments, not knowing, I was not aware it's Govich, you know. And then when I visited Fritz Albert Popp, late Fritz Albert Popp, I also came to know about Alexander Govich's grandson, Lev Belousov, together with Vladimir, and this touched me always. That was a personal remark. Alexander Govich had in cuvettes onion roots, and he exposed the tips of onion roots to an other tip of onion roots, and he realized that where the exposure was from this root to that root, in this region, there were much more cell divisions going on. Not above, not below, not behind, but exactly. Do you see on my finger? No. Why not? So, you see that here? Okay, so there were only here more cell divisions, more than here or in the back. So he discovered this, and he called it mitogenetic radiation, and he did not assume. He took quartz separators and normal glass separators, and with normal glass he had no effect. With quartz glass he had effects. Quartz glass allows the transmission of many frequencies, including UV, while with glass the transmission breaks down at the beginning of weak UVA waves. So I was using quartz and glass cuvettes in the beginning, and made experiments with. You don't have to go into the detail here and absorb your brain capacity with these numbers. These were just 3 different experiments where I tried to find out, is something going on? What is going on? I had quartz separators and glass separators in either case, and we are now going to look at 1, 2, 3 results. Just be aware that once I had positioned the cell populations in the cuvettes, I placed them in a black box for 2 days. So I just left them alone in a black box to see not to see nothing, just to let them alone without any external influence. And then after 2 days, I start counting them, and this was one first result, which just indicated that the populations have an effect on each other, but that it depended on the separating material. There's not much to learn here, except there is an effect. These were 2 controls, and so I was quite sure that I'm on the right way. There is something to discover. In another experiment with a little bit different setup, I again found strong effects, but realized that with glass separation there was no effect, and with quartz separation there was a bigger effect. And also it was not just a confirmation of Govich's experiments. I had effects also with glass separation. He had none. So we cannot simply say it's all UV based, the whole communication. Maybe in the visible range there are also photons that are able to induce. And this is also quite striking, because the field squares is glass separation, this is quartz separation. Here I was not looking at cell division rate, but how much they eat. You can count vacuoles. I don't explain how, it's easy actually, fixation. And the effects are these, the tester cells, these are the numbers of the growth of the tester cells, yeah? How much do they grow when they are surrounded by the same number of cells? There were 15 or 20 inside, surrounded by 15 or 20, or surrounded by 300 or 400 cells. The same for this. And here we can see that there are effects, and they are completely different. They are going in the other direction. So after these, and this was blind made. So after these 3 major results, I was confident enough to publish this, and it was accepted by PLOS ONE in 2009. But I was looking for a pattern, and now I would like to make you aware that first I will tell you something about this analysis of these data after I obtained them, and the second will be that there is something in common in all experiments. With quartz separation, there was usually a decrease in growth in the tester population. I will come back to this. Now first here, sorry, I have to carefully lead you now. There was no effect between inducer and tester population in the glass-separated treatment group, but there was one in the quartz-separated treatment group. And I'm sorry, I have to talk now with my hands before I continue, because this is the most difficult part. I know that because after the talk nobody understood what I meant. Yeah, so when ecologists make an experiment and then they repeat the experiment and then they repeat the same experiment again 5, 6, 7 times and make the statistics. So in the statistics you have the repetition of the experiment and your treatment as 2 factors. And the repetition of the experiment has the strongest contribution to the variation in the results, much more than the treatment. So, since nobody really knows why this is so, ecologists tend to make not 7 experiments, but 1 big. So they don't have these whatever induced variation. But it's observed. And I call it swinging with the environment. You get it? If I just let these cells grow, nothing else, 1 cuvette grow in week 1, then in week 2, in week 3, they show different growth rates from week to week to week. This I call swinging with the environment. I don't know what the environmental factor is. We are still thinking of some cosmic radiation, but this will be maybe in the future. We will have more data on this. Now it's becoming interesting because I go first to this picture. This is the results, these are the results of exactly that experiment we have been looking at. Look, there was glass separation, and this p-value indicates no effect from one onto the other. This was the quartz separation. This number indicates a quite significant effect from one population on the other population. That's what we have already seen. But now you have to look at these numbers here. These numbers show whether there has been a contribution from repeating the experiment. Now what is interesting is this. When there has been no effect from one population to the other, both populations swing with the environment. You see, significant effect from the repetition of the experiment, also here. But when one population had an effect on the other, have a look, one is completely free of swinging with the environment. And I believe this is something basic. So one is under the effect of the environment, the other one is not. This is actually, no, one back. This is another experiment. This is another experiment where we have the very same situation. There has been a significant effect from the inducer population to the tester population. The inducer population is like decoupled from this environmental effect, while the tester population is still. Besides, you see these 3 points here? These were my first data points and made me confident to continue. That was all information I had. So this was again a bit personal anyway. So what I try to summarize is that when one population of cells influences the other one, this one still stays in a relation to the cousin, while this one is not anymore. And I have a feeling that here we can learn a lot. I will continue asking myself, how can I make other experiments to find out more about this, probably with bringing together more than 2 populations, but that's not now. Now, as you remember, I had told you in the first 3 results that there was always an effect with quartz separation that cell division was reduced in the tester population. And I decided to look at quartz separation only because this allows all electromagnetic waves to be exchanged between the populations, and this is closer to nature when Paramecium swims without glass separators. So this is closer to the truth. Now, you need to know that when I work with these cells, the concentration of 300 Paramecium per 1 milliliter, this is kind of carrying capacity. It can be warm, can be enough food, they will not become more. So they regulate themselves. The question is, how do they do that? The classic answer is chemically. It stinks a lot, we stop growth. It doesn't stink a lot, we can still grow. That would be the chemical answer. Now, maybe this is true, but I wanted to know whether there is an electromagnetic regulation. And I would like to explain you shortly the design of the experiment. The bigger square is always the inducer population. If I place 50, they will still grow nicely. If I place 100, they still grow. 200 will also grow, but much less. And 300 will not grow during these 2 days because they already reached carrying capacity. Now, imagine that the 300 tell each other electromagnetically, hey, we reached our carrying capacity. Then this electromagnetic signal also trespasses to the tester population. And it says we are enough, length of growth. While these 50, if they tell each other, hey, let's go on, it's funky, then this information is also going to these 5 tester cells. So this is why I took always 5, 5, 5, 5. This is the experiment. How do the 5 respond? And this is the answer. Here, you have just what I told you. The 300 cells are not growing. The 50 cells are still growing a lot. And this is the growth of the 5 cells in the inner cuvette. So this gives me confidence in saying, at least in Paramecium, there is a capacity to electromagnetically regulate cell density. And I think this is an interesting result because it's nicely adding to our understanding that chemical stuff of the cells can also have such effects. So, yeah, I was trying to publish this 6 years until finally it was accepted. But I had too many thoughts in it, and I had to give it a nice haircut. So in the end, okay, there was only this left. Now, is it a universal language? I wanted to know whether Euglena viridis has also an effect on Paramecium. It had a very strong effect. I was interested whether these worms, rotatoria, they consist already in almost 1,000 cells, are only a little bit bigger than Paramecia, and don't analyze this. It's just showing that there are very, very significant effects in all directions. So it could be a kind of a universal code. Where will I go? We are coming to the outlook. I imagine that both signals coming from the metabolome but also from the electron may trigger entanglement between cell populations. However, I do not know how to recognize whether it's really entanglement or not. I just love talking like that, you know. Yeah, isn't it? So, I mean, talking like this, you know, tackling the issue, rather one might state, decision-making is an intelligent process, and this already is part of consciousness, and consciousness implies that everything is with everything in connection, and this is already resonance, and this is entanglement. It's lovely. Again, I love that. but I do not know how to recognize it. I still do not know, but that's what keeps me going on. You know, that's the banana I hold in front of myself. Yeah, I mean, yeah. Okay. And anyway, have a look. You have now, you learned that the inducer population has a reducing effect, but once I took only one cell as a tester population. One cell. And that cell was pushed by the inducers. Usually there's a decreasing effect. So I would like to have in the future 3 populations, the inducer with 5 here and 1 here. And I want to know whether the 100 decide, hey, let's push the little baby here, and these we just ignore them. I want to know whether they make decisions. I believe that cells are intelligent, very intelligent. They are much more than I can imagine. And here, this is also an interesting result. This is when the inducer population, when some of them were dying, when there was mortality, then there was no decrease in the tester population, only in case of mortality. In case of mortality, they started to grow much more. So did they sense the death in the neighbor population and compensated for it? Or did the souls fly over? It's not a cabaret, huh? We just, yeah, okay. So this is what we know since the 19th century, chemical communication. This is what I've been showing here with this presentation. I'm not the only one, but only a few people make it on the planet. I'm astounded. And in the near future, we will try to have such cuvettes separated with optical fibers in between to get closer to the question, is it really a photonic communication that is going on? And now we have to say thank you for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you very much from our side, and for your sense of humor and for this aesthetics in your research design. Beauty must also be placed here, and that was the case. Are there some questions?
Thank you for your interesting report. From 20 years, I'm working so strong in the field of electromagnetic fields. I am able to measure everything in your research with frequencies, wavelengths, and then will not be hypothesis, will be theory. And this is very interesting continue of the work of Govich, also of my friend Fritz Albert Popp, with big future, about the proofs for development of understanding of energy and the cells. My question is, from how many years you make this research, and these parameters do you have measurement with collaboration with another laboratories?
The first question was how many years I'm doing this research. Yeah, you need to know that I'm alone with that. It's a one-man show. I have no laboratory with 15 people. I cannot work 5 days a week on it. So I have to give my spare time and try to as efficiently as I can. I started in 2005, 6 with the first experiments, and only in 9 I could publish the first results, you know. And my time is unfortunately so limited that I cannot really offer cooperation freely, you know, because I don't have the time. I'm not earning my money with Paramecium. I'm kind of giving my money to Paramecium, you know. And I don't remember the second question. Okay.
Yeah, two quick questions. One is that you might imagine that quorum sensing molecules, the production of the sensors, you know, it smells bad in here, is actually coupled to exposure to these frequencies which are being emitted. So you obviously have a way of looking or assaying for the production of these pheromones. And the second one is, I think that Paramecium is an awful creature that eats bacteria, isn't it? I think
It's not awful.
No, well, from my point of view as an ecologist,
Yes.
working on E. coli, it's terrible. This is
Oh,
just
that's an ecologist.
Yeah.
Someone working on E. coli. I didn't know that.
Yeah. So it's a real monster. And what I want, one possibility, a crazy possibility, but we're in that world, is that what really matters isn't the communication between Paramecia, but the communication between E. coli and Paramecia. You know, this could be a long-range targeting system. So my question for you is, if you put the Paramecium into one container and E. coli into the other, can you get the Paramecia to salivate?
Okay. To what? To
dribble, to salivate.
Yeah. Look, when I did these experiments, I was guest scientist in the Tropical Institute of Switzerland, of Basel, and Marcel Tanner, the head of the institute, you know, he just gave me time also to talk. And when I had the first results, I went to him to say, now how can I make it waterproof? And he suggested to make at least 2 controls. And one control was, that's the obvious one, you know, one control is just the medium wherein Paramecia swim during an experiment always contains bacteria. I cannot free it from bacteria. Yeah? So the question was, does the effect come from bacteria or from Paramecia? But it's very easy to have medium without Paramecia because it's the feeding substance. So here there were only the bacteria exposed to the tester populations in both directions, from inside to outside, outside to inside, with glass and quartz separation. And there were no effects. So the effects are not coming from the bacteria. And this was with pure water. There were also no effects. So, I'm sorry, but Paramecia remained decent.
One single more question. Yes.
That's why I work with them.
Daniel, I'm here. Thank you very much for your very beautiful presentation. And I would like only to add that you are not alone. There is, not at all. There is my colleague, Alexander Burlakov, who is working in Moscow University, and he studies for many years the electromagnetic communication between fish eggs, which are separated. Yes, fish eggs, he takes fish eggs, they are separated, both put into quartz cuvette and may separate at long distances. So he has tremendous quantity of data, which unfortunately is very much restricted, because he has problem with publications and so on.
And
but
it's published in Russian or in English?
Yes, unfortunately most publications are in Russian. But his major results, I would say that, for example, of course, with fish eggs you have the stages of development.
Yes.
And if you take fish eggs on one stage of development and fish eggs on another stage of development, then depending on their quantity and so on, one population may induce the distortions in the development of another population. So that means that older, it hampers the development of the younger, or makes the fish with 2 heads or 2 tails. I think that, of course, they do not then develop further on. So this really, and he also studied that the whole spectrum is working from ultraviolet to visible, and he uses filters and manages to show that this particular, if you erase this particular wave band, then there will be another result and so on. A great number of data. Unfortunately, he's also in a sense alone. So you should combine to loneliness.
I see. Maybe I should come to Moscow and talk him.
Thank you for this precision. Excuse me, Peter. We have just a question now. The next speaker is Jerry Pollett, but I didn't have any contact. We didn't see. Ah, it is you.